The birds were reacting to something that didn't exist. At least, that's what it looked like. I was standing on a back porch with a cup of coffee, watching a perfectly ordinary morning unfold. A chickadee moved through the branches of a maple tree. A robin searched the lawn for breakfast. A blue jay called from somewhere near the fence. The feeder was busy. The yard was alive. Then everything changed. Not gradually, not one bird at a time. Every bird in the yard seemed to make the same decision at the exact same moment. The robin stopped moving. The chickadee disappeared into cover. The blue jay went silent. Within seconds, the entire backyard felt different. I looked toward the trees. Nothing. I scanned the sky. Nothing. I checked the fence line. Nothing. Yet every bird behaved as if danger had already arrived. And that was the strange part. Whatever had caused the reaction, I couldn't see it. If you've spent enough mornings around birds, you've probably witnessed a moment like this yourself. Maybe it lasted only a few seconds. Maybe you barely noticed it. But the birds noticed it. They always do. Most people think they are the observers. We watch the feeder. We watch the branches. We watch the birds. But what if, sometimes, the birds are the ones watching for us? What if those sudden changes in sound and behavior are not random at all? What if they are part of a communication system that has been operating quietly in your yard every single day? Researchers associated with places like the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the University of Cambridge have spent years studying how birds monitor their environment and share information with one another. The deeper scientists look, the more remarkable the picture becomes. Birds often detect changes long before humans do. They notice movement we miss, they recognize patterns we ignore, and they react to signals that never even reach our awareness. So, what did those birds know that morning? And how often is the same thing happening in your yard without you realizing it? By the end of this video, you'll understand some of the most important warning signals birds use, what sudden silence can really mean, and why listening may tell you more than looking. Tomorrow morning, before you glance at the feeder, try standing still for 2 minutes. Listen first. Pay attention to the moment the sound changes, because what feels like ordinary birdsong may actually be information moving through the natural world around you. And if birds are part of your mornings too, wherever you're watching from, consider staying with us on this journey. Every backyard tells a different story. Together, we may start hearing what we've been missing all along. Before we can understand the warning, we need to understand the bird that noticed it first. It was not the largest bird in the yard. It was not the loudest. It was not even the bird most people would pay attention to. It was a chickadee. If you have ever watched birds around your home, you have probably seen one hopping through branches, moving almost constantly, never seeming to stay still for very long. They look small, cheerful, and harmless. The kind of bird people enjoy seeing but rarely think much about afterward. Yet, hidden inside that tiny body is one of the most sophisticated warning systems in the backyard world. That same morning, after the strange silence had briefly settled over the yard, life appeared to return to normal. The robin was back on the lawn. A finch landed at the feeder. Somewhere beyond the fence, a blue jay called out. For a moment, everything felt ordinary again. Then a sound slipped through the morning air. It was so short and so light that many people would never notice it. Seat. Just a single note, thin, sharp, almost invisible. But the effect was immediate. The finch left the feeder. The robin stopped searching the grass. Another chickadee disappeared into a nearby shrub. It was as if an unseen message had moved through the yard faster than the wind itself. A few seconds later, the reason revealed itself. A hawk glided across the sky above the neighborhood, silent, smooth, effortless. The warning had arrived before the danger entered my field of view. That small sound is known as a seat call, and it is one of the ways chickadees alert nearby birds to a threat from above. Unlike the songs we often associate with birds, these calls are not about attracting mates or filling the morning with music. They serve a completely different purpose. They carry information. A song says, "I am here." An alarm call says, "Pay attention." Researchers connected to the University of Washington and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology have spent years studying chickadee communication, and what they discovered is remarkable. These birds are not simply making noise. Different calls can trigger different responses. Some tell nearby birds to freeze. Others encourage them to move toward cover. Some even communicate details about the level of danger. But perhaps the most fascinating part is not the call itself. It is what happens next. The chickadee gives the warning, yet the message does not stay with the chickadee. Finches respond. Robins respond. Newthatches respond. Birds that are not even the same species react as if they all understand the same urgent language. That shared awareness gives every bird in the area a better chance of staying safe. Tomorrow morning, try a small experiment of your own. Listen for a sound that seems different from the usual chorus around your yard. Something shorter, higher, sharper. Then watch what happens. Does the feeder suddenly empty? Do several birds stop what they are doing at the same time? Do their eyes and bodies turn toward the same part of the sky? If they do, you may be witnessing one of nature's oldest information networks in action. And as fascinating as the chickadee is, it is not the most remarkable part of this story. The most remarkable part is the network listening on the other end. What makes this story truly remarkable is that the warning did not end with the chickadee. In many ways, the chickadee may have been only the beginning. Most people glance into a backyard and see individual birds living separate lives. A robin searching the lawn, a blue jay perched near the fence, a nuthatch gracefully descending a tree trunk, or a woodpecker tapping somewhere deeper among the trees. It appears to be nothing more than a collection of unrelated creatures sharing the same space. But what if that impression is misleading? What if your backyard functions less like a neighborhood and more like a living, interconnected network? Imagine for a moment that every bird carries its own unique piece of information. The robin spends much of its time near the ground, noticing subtle movements in the grass beneath shrubs and along the edges of the garden. The nuthatch explores tree bark from perspectives most birds never experience, detecting details hidden along trunks and branches. The woodpecker moves through the vertical layers of the landscape, often sensing changes in places other birds rarely visit. And then there is the blue jay, bold, confident, and impossible to ignore. If the chickadee serves as an early warning system, the blue jay often becomes the neighborhood broadcaster. One bird notices something, another confirms it, and a third carries the message farther, until suddenly the entire yard seems aware. This is where the story grows far beyond a single alarm call. Scientists studying bird behavior have discovered that many species pay attention not only to members of their own kind, but also to entirely different birds. Researchers associated with the University of Cambridge have explored how birds learn from one another, while studies connected to the University of Exeter have revealed how information can travel through animal communities with remarkable efficiency. The result is something that feels almost unbelievable when you first recognize it. Birds that look different, sound different, and behave differently can still benefit from the same flow of information. One of the clearest examples of this phenomenon is a behavior known as mobbing. You may have witnessed it without realizing what you were seeing. Several birds suddenly gather around the same tree, shrub, or branch, calling repeatedly and moving with unusual purpose, all focused on a single location. At first glance, the scene may seem chaotic, but in reality, it is often highly organized. Information is being exchanged, attention is being directed, and the network is concentrating on something important. What makes this especially fascinating is that no bird needs to understand the entire picture. Each one contributes only what it knows, and together they create a far richer understanding of the world around them. Cornell researchers studying mixed species flocks have documented how different birds often gain significant survival advantages simply by remaining connected to these shared information systems. In other words, a bird does not need to witness everything firsthand. Sometimes it can benefit from discoveries already made by others. Once you begin to see this, your backyard changes completely. It is no longer just a place where birds happen to gather. It becomes a dynamic landscape where information flows continuously from one observer to another. Tomorrow morning, try watching for something most people overlook. If several birds suddenly focus on the same spot, pay close attention. If a blue jay begins calling repeatedly and other birds respond, watch carefully. Notice which species react first and which arrive later. You may discover that the most valuable thing in your yard is not the feeder, the seed, or even the birds themselves, but the information moving silently among them. And once you begin to recognize that invisible network, another mystery starts to reveal itself. Sometimes the most important message in the entire system is not a sound at all. Sometimes it is silence. The strange thing about silence is that most people never notice it until it has already settled in around them. We remember the sounds instead. The robin singing cheerfully from the lawn, the blue jay calling from the fence, the chickadees weaving through the branches of the maple tree. But we rarely catch the precise moment when those familiar voices fade away. And yet, that fleeting disappearance is the mystery at the heart of this story. One moment, the yard is alive with activity, a vibrant network humming with information as birds communicate from perch to perch to perch, and the next, almost without warning, everything falls still. For decades, scientists who study bird behavior have been fascinated by these moments, because silence can convey information just as powerfully as sound. In some cases, it may be the most important message of all. The first kind is what researchers often call predator silence, and it is usually the easiest for people to recognize. A hawk glides overhead, an owl appears near the edge of the woods, or a falcon sweeps through the area, and suddenly the birds stop announcing their presence. Calls vanish, movement slows, and the entire network shifts into a state of heightened awareness. To us, the yard may seem empty, but to the birds, it has become intensely focused. Every eye is watching, every instinct is alert. This silence often lingers longer than we expect because the birds are waiting for reassurance that the danger has truly passed. Studies on predator responses, including research associated with the University of Exeter, have shown just how rapidly birds can change their behavior when they detect even subtle signs of a threat. Yet not every silence signals the presence of a predator. There is another kind, quieter and easier to overlook. Imagine a delivery truck rumbling into the neighborhood, a stranger walking near a property line, or an unfamiliar noise breaking the rhythm of the day. In these moments, birds often pause their usual activities while they gather information and assess the situation. The silence may last only half a minute or perhaps a minute before the sounds slowly return. Nothing dangerous has occurred. The network was simply taking a moment to understand what was happening before deciding how to react. This is why context matters so much. A brief silence does not always mean danger. Sometimes it means curiosity, caution, and investigation. Then there is a third kind of silence, one that many people never think about, and perhaps the most intriguing of all. It begins long after most of us have fallen asleep. During spring and autumn nights, millions of migratory birds travel across North America beneath the cover of darkness. High above neighborhoods, farms, forests, and cities, an extraordinary journey unfolds unseen. A vast movement taking place while the world below rests. Migration monitoring projects led by Cornell have revealed just how many birds may be passing overhead while most people remain completely unaware. Then dawn arrives. New birds settle into the landscape, familiar residents encounter unfamiliar voices, and fresh calls weave themselves into the morning chorus. New information enters the network, and although the yard may sound much the same, the conversation has subtly changed. That constant transformation is one of the reasons birdwatching remains so endlessly captivating. The backyard you wake up to today is not necessarily the same one you listened to yesterday. Tomorrow morning, try becoming a student of silence. Notice how long a quiet spell lasts. Watch carefully to see whether a hawk, an owl, or another predator eventually reveals itself. Pay attention to which birds return first and which linger in caution a little longer. If you wish, keep a simple notebook and record what you observe. With time, patterns will begin to emerge, and once they do, silence will no longer feel empty. Instead, it will become another voice in the ongoing conversation of nature, a voice that has been speaking softly around you all along, waiting patiently to be heard. By now, the backyard may feel subtly different from the place it seemed to be at the beginning of this story. The feeder still hangs where it always has. The maple tree still stretches its branches toward the sky. The robin still wanders across the lawn, and the chickadee still flits lightly through the leaves. Nothing has physically changed, and yet something undeniably feels different. What once sounded like ordinary background noise, the familiar soundtrack of a quiet morning, now begins to resemble fragments of an ongoing conversation. Not a conversation we completely understand, but one we are finally learning how to hear. And perhaps that is the true reward of paying closer attention to the birds around us. It is not about memorizing every call or becoming an expert overnight. It is about discovering a new way of noticing the world. Tomorrow morning, try a simple experiment. Step outside a few minutes earlier than usual, coffee in hand if you like, and stand quietly on the porch beside the feeder or near the garden. Before you look at anything, simply listen. Let the sounds reach you first. Listen for the delicate, high-pitched warning note of a chickadee. Listen for the repeated calls of a blue jay echoing through the neighborhood. Notice whether several birds suddenly direct their attention toward the same spot, or whether a brief hush settles across the yard. Then watch patiently and see what unfolds. You do not need expensive equipment or years of experience to begin. Curiosity is enough. With time, patterns that once seemed invisible may start to reveal themselves. You may notice that a sudden silence lasts only moments after a delivery truck rolls by, that robins often return to the lawn before other birds, or that a blue jay frequently sounds an alarm before the rest of the neighborhood responds. Little by little, the backyard becomes less mysterious and far richer with meaning. One of the most reassuring aspects of all this is that these observations are not based on guesswork or imagination. They are supported by decades of ornithological research carried out by scientists who have devoted countless hours to understanding how birds communicate, learn, and respond to the world around them. Yet perhaps the most remarkable part is that you do not need a laboratory to witness the evidence for yourself. You can step outside tomorrow morning and experience it firsthand. The birds were never merely decorating the morning with pleasant sounds. They were describing it. They were sharing information about the sky above, the ground below, and the countless changes unfolding around them each day. And once you begin recognizing those signals, it becomes surprisingly difficult to stop listening. Birds are not predicting the future. They are simply paying attention to the world in ways many of us have forgotten. Much of what we hear can be explained through decades of scientific study, while some of it remains intriguingly difficult to fully understand. Perhaps that lingering mystery is part of what makes listening to birds feel so enchanting. This is not an attempt to humanize birds beyond what science supports. Rather, it is an invitation to notice how much information is already flowing through the natural world around us every single morning, waiting patiently for someone to listen.